Class is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Brian Lips, and I work for the North Carolina Clean Energy Technology Center at NC State University. I imagine many, if not all of you, joined our previous webinar where we looked at some of the existing resources related to community solar and heard a few case studies on community solar projects in the Southeast. So thank you also for participating in that webinar. And also thank you to everyone who completed our survey after that webinar. Your responses to the survey were very helpful in giving us an idea of where the knowledge gaps are related to community solar in the Southeast and where we should focus most of our efforts during the remainder of the first year of this project. So first, a really quick review of the Community Solar for the Southeast project. It's funded by the U.S. Department of Energy through the Sunshot Initiative and was awarded under the State Energy Strategies solicitation. It's a 3-year project, and the ultimate goal is for us to provide technical assistance to co-ops and munis throughout the Southeast who are interested in developing community solar programs. Year 1 of the project, which we are in right now, is focused on developing the resources we will use to provide technical assistance in years 2 and 3. A key deliverable to come out of this work in the first year will be a guidebook for designing and implementing community solar projects in the Southeast. So keep an eye out for that towards the end of this year. So during our last webinar, we looked at some of the great resources that are currently available and full of helpful information for anyone looking to implement a community solar program. But do these resources answer all the questions a utility might have, especially a co-op or muni in a southeastern state? Well, that's what we were hoping to identify with the survey you completed. So in this webinar, we'll review the results of the survey and the conclusions our team reached based on those results. And then we'll discuss the next phase of the project, which is a series of working groups that we hope you'll participate in. And then I'll talk a bit about the technical assistance we're offering to co-ops and munis through this project. And then I'll hand it over to one of our project partners at Rocky Mountain Institute to discuss some of their work on this project and outside of this project through their SHINE program. If you have any questions during this webinar, you can submit them in the chat box. My colleague Ashut will be monitoring those questions, and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can at the end. So we had 33 people complete the survey. Again, a big thank you to all 33 of you. And we had a good mix of backgrounds represented in those 33 responses. There were a couple cooperatives, someone from a G&T, some private businesses, a couple local government officials, a handful of advocacy organizations, and a number of people who identified themselves as other. So one of the questions we asked was, in general, which of these aspects of community solar is most appealing to your organization? As you can see, a pretty broad smattering of things with customer engagement, cost savings, and environmental benefits sparking the most interest. Clearly, many people see the broad appeal of community solar as a way for utilities to offer their customers something beyond just kilowatt hours. And we also gave the respondents a list of potential knowledge gaps that we had identified and asked them to rank them in order of importance. So the most important challenge the group identified was program model and pricing. Now, this ranking is based on the weighted average of the rankings submitted by the respondents. The challenge that was ranked number 1 by the most people was actually different state policies, which 17% said was the number 1 challenge. But program model and pricing had many respondents ranking it in the top third, so its weighted average ultimately placed it at number 1. After that came limitations in wholesale power contracts. The contracts that utilities have with their generation and transmission provider may place restrictions on the amount of generation they can own themselves and limit their ability to implement a community solar program. So this was seen as a big challenge. Then different state policies came in third. Now, a utility surely knows the lay of the land in their state, what they can and cannot do. But this would be a big concern for solar installers looking to do business across state lines, or advocacy groups trying to promote community solar across a region. With so much control at the state level and even at the utility level, the opportunity for community solar can vary greatly from state to state, and this was seen by some as a large hurdle. Next came unfamiliarity with program design, basically how to structure a community solar program. Then came integration with billing, high upfront costs, unfamiliarity with storage options, concerns over cost shifting to non-subscribers, and then last, customer interest. Now, we also provided an open-ended question, which allowed respondents to suggest additional gaps and challenges that were not in the list provided. Now, 2 respondents highlighted dealing with investor-owned utilities as a challenge. Another respondent indicated that lack of interest in new programs from cooperative utility management. One respondent mentioned the necessity of obtaining city council support, presumably for municipal utility programs, as well as the need to consider the effect on city revenue. One respondent indicated that the future of the investment tax credit was a challenge. One respondent wrote that the premiums placed on customer subscribers in various markets were a challenge, perhaps referring to difficulties in selling the program to casual customers or low-income customers. And one respondent stated that overcoming misinformation was a challenge. Now, some of the challenges identified by the group are not necessarily gaps. That is, they may be challenges that someone would face in trying to implement or promote a community solar program, but the existing resources that are already out there already provide sufficient information about how to deal with those challenges. So those are some issues that the project team will likely address when providing technical assistance, but they are not necessarily issues we need to build a working group around. So these non-gap challenges include integration with billing systems. NRECA's Community Solar Playbook includes a whole 40-page section that deals with IT considerations for supporting the marketing and program administration for community solar. So we feel there isn't really anything we can add there. Next, community solar program design. There's a number of resources that review the whole range of program design options, including NRECA's Community Solar Playbook, SEPA's Community Solar Program Design Models, and the Coalition for Community Solar Access even has a decision matrix to help you decide what type of program is best for your utility's needs. Now, I will say that there are 2 narrow issues within here that we think warrant further research. One, the impact of energy storage on program design, and 2, innovative credit rate structures, such as those based on the value of solar or time-varying rates. So I'll discuss those a bit more in a moment. But first, another non-gap challenge was overcoming high upfront costs. Now, another project we work on at the Clean Tech Center is the Database of State Incentives for Renewables and Efficiency, or DESIRE. So we have a pretty good grasp on what, if any, financial incentives can help drive down the costs of a project. But also, again, NRECA's playbook has a wealth of information on the finance and procurement side of things, and one of our partners on this project, Rocky Mountain Institute, has a lot of experience with bulk procurement of solar through their SHINE program. Next, stimulating customer interest. Again, not to sound like a broken record, but NRECA's playbook includes almost 50 pages on marketing, member services, and communications. And additionally, SEPA's playbook includes some useful information, and SEPA also conducted a nationwide survey of over 2,000 people to determine customer preferences for community solar. All those resources can help a potential utility figure out how best to stimulate the interest of their customers. And lastly, education was identified as a non-gap challenge, and one that can be overcome with any of the great resources out there, and hopefully through the work we do in this project. So again, these are all important issues, but we plan to build working groups around topic areas that have not yet been sufficiently examined. So what topic areas are we building working groups around? Well, we're assembling 3 working groups and 1 advisory group, if you will. We'll have working groups to look into program design for community solar plus storage, innovative credit rate structures, and getting buy-in from local leadership. And we'll have an advisory group to gather information about the policy landscape and the unique utility market variations across all the southeastern states covered by this project. For each of these working groups, the project team has assembled a collection of questions on each topic, which we hope the working groups can answer. Now, for a lot of this, we're not necessarily looking for the one correct answer, because there may be many answers to a single question. We're simply looking for a menu of options, if you will, for possible solutions to these challenges. So first, the program design for community solar plus storage working group. As I said, there are plenty of resources out there that go into great detail about the different design models for community solar. But we are unaware of any resources that consider storage in those designs. Now, storage is very much on the rise right now and could be a major part of the grid of the future. And there are definitely benefits for the utility if they were to couple a community solar system with storage. But there are some unanswered questions related to integrating storage into a community solar project. So the project team has come up with some preliminary questions to get the working group started, and we'll welcome other questions identified by the working group once it gets started. So first, if storage is coupled with a community solar project, should the subscribers receive some of the benefits of the storage? And if so, how? Next, is the value of storage different in the Southeast compared to other regions? And to look at it more closely, is the value of storage different within different southeastern states? Next, storage is in a rapidly evolving policy area. It's a new technology, and utilities and states and regulators are still trying to figure out the best way to integrate storage into the grid. So we'll also look into the current policies and incentives that specifically pertain to storage at this time. Then we'll look into how significant the demand component is for the utilities. How much can storage help reduce the demand rates they pay to their G&T? And do their contracts with their G&T preclude them from installing solar? And of course, solar panels will most likely outlive the batteries. So how do you deal with the battery replacement costs? And how do you build that into the program design? So those are some of the questions we'll look to address with this working group. Next working group, innovative credit rate structures. To date, most community solar programs have credited subscribers at either the retail rate or the avoided cost rate, basically mirroring the options that are out there for traditional net metered customers. But in recent years, state policymakers across the country have been examining alternative rate designs for their traditional net metering customers, those customers with their own roof-mounted systems. And those concepts are starting to creep into community solar. In Hawaii, for example, proposed community solar rules would provide time-varying credit rates to participants, while Minnesota is shifting toward rates based on the value of solar. And New York is now utilizing a quote-unquote value stack approach, where credit rates are based on the hourly locational value of the energy, the capacity value, the environmental value, and the demand reduction value. So with these new approaches being so, well, new, the available resources don't fully examine all of these options. So we're expecting this working group to consider these and other innovative credit rate structures and produce a menu of options that utilities could consider when evaluating community solar. So those are some of the questions we'll hope to tackle with this working group. And the last working group, getting buy-in from local leadership. Aside from the resources developed by the NRECA, most of the existing resources for community solar are focused on investor-owned utilities. While many of the topics related to community solar are cross-cutting and can be applied universally to IOUs, co-ops, and munis, co-ops and munis do have different operational and regulatory structures with different end goals when compared to those of IOUs. And of course, they are self-regulating. While most, if not all, investor-owned utilities with community solar programs have implemented them because their regulators told them they had to, for co-ops and munis, the choice is entirely theirs. That's a good thing, but also presents a challenge. How do you get buy-in from the decision makers within co-ops and munis? That will be the focus of this working group. So some of the questions we'll want this working group to address are there existing networks that we can tap into to get closer to the decision makers for these utilities? And what criteria do city councils and co-op boards use to evaluate community solar programs? Should we try to work through the G&Ts or work directly with the utilities? So those are some of the questions we hope to address with this working group. And lastly, a complete understanding of the existing regulatory environment for community solar in each state will be crucial for the successful delivery of high-value technical assistance in this project. The responses to the survey showed that other stakeholders in the Southeast agree with the project team's assessment that a full account of the policy environment for each state is a noticeable gap in the available resources. So, we've created a draft document which provides information about the current policy landscape for each southeastern state. It's not entirely complete, and we'd also like some feedback to make sure we're researching all the things we should research to paint a clear policy picture. And we'd also like some members to verify the information we've gathered so far, so we're soliciting help with this. Now, this work doesn't really lend itself to a working group per se, since there won't be much to discuss. So we envision this as more of a fact-finding mission to be conducted mostly through email and shared documents. In the end, we hope to have a completed policy and market matrix for each state that can be reliably used to fully understand the environment for community solar in each state. So the 3 working groups will each hold 3 bi-weekly conference calls, which we don't expect to last more than an hour each, with the first one coming next week. Each working group will be chaired by someone from the project team. To help guide the working groups, prior to the first call, the chair will share with its working group the list of questions related to their topic area, which we hope the working group will be able to find answers for. So during that first call for each working group, the working groups will discuss the questions, why they're important or potentially irrelevant to the working group, and whether there are any additional questions the working group should consider. And then after that first call, all participants will be invited to contribute their thoughts to the questions, which will be gathered by the working group chair. Those responses will then be discussed during the second call. We can see where the participants agree and disagree and try to reach consensus where necessary. Now, again, for a lot of this, we're not necessarily looking for one correct answer, so we invite as many answers as we can get, because there may be many answers to a single question. So we're simply looking for a menu of options that each utility can consider for each of these challenges. And then we'll use that third call for any further discussion needed and to try to reach consensus on the working group's recommendations. And then after that third call, the working group chair will share its recommendations with the rest of the working group and with the rest of the project team. And then those recommendations will go a long way in helping us create our guidebook by the end of the year. So if you have a little time to spare over the next month, we'd love to have you participate in one of the working groups. After this webinar, you'll receive a link to a Google form that you can use to sign up for a working group. You can express interest in more than one of the working groups if you like, but we'll likely sign you up for just one working group based on need. And you should hear from the working group chair by the end of this week with additional information. And then again, we expect to have the first round of calls next week, and then the second round of calls 2 weeks after that, and then the final call 2 weeks after that. So we're still in year 1 of the project, and we won't be focusing all of our attention on technical assistance until years 2 and 3. But if there are any co-ops or munis on the call today, we'd be happy to start helping you now. So here are some of the issues related to community solar that we can provide free technical assistance with right now. System selection and cost-benefit analysis. We can work with you to model annual production and economic cash flows or analyze equipment options. We can also help you develop an operational plan for integrating storage into a community solar project and maximizing its return. We can provide guidance on program design considerations or help with the project development side of things, developing an RFQ or RFP. We can assist with the outreach and marketing of the program to the utilities members, or we can help to pool multiple utility programs together under one procurement to drive down the costs. And of course, with the assistance of the working groups, we'll have even more services that we can provide in years 2 and 3. So now I'd like to turn it over to one of our project partners, Titian Palazzi from the Rocky Mountain Institute, to discuss some of the technical assistance they're providing through this project and through their own independent efforts with their SHINE program. Titian, are you there?
I am, Brian.
Do you have any slides that you would like to share with the group?
Yes, please, if you could make me presenter.
Okay, let's see.
So, Brian, do you currently see my PowerPoint presentation?
You're good, I see it.
Fantastic, wonderful. Yes, so to all webinar participants, Rocky Mountain Institute is a non-profit founded in the early 1980s, based originally in Colorado, but now with offices around the United States. We work in many different sectors of the clean energy transition, from mobility to urban design, and from building efficiency to renewables. And our SHINE program works specifically on accelerating what we call community scale solar, which encompasses community solar with shared off-takers, but also distribution grid-based systems with a single off-taker, such as an electric cooperative or a municipal utility. And we do this by supporting regional procurements in states where community scale solar has economic merit. So we are supporting NCCSU in this project in one way through technical assistance. And what we thought might be helpful is to share a little bit of what we have done in other regions, so that the utilities on the line today can have a slightly more practical sense of how the NCCSU RMI partnership under this DOE program can support them directly. So the next slide, this slide, should show a map of the United States with several states colored in green. Rocky Mountain Institute SHINE team, which was started 2.5 years ago, did the first co-op support project in New Mexico, which has been completed. And we helped 4 co-ops to procure or sign PPAs for a total of 7 megawatts across 6 sites. And then we have ongoing procurements, which means that PPAs have not yet been signed in Colorado for electric cooperatives, in upstate New York for a group of cities, and in Texas, where we are currently working with co-ops and munis, as well as starting a program to support state agencies. So I would like to describe 2 of these projects in a slightly more detail, specifically Colorado and New Mexico. for the utilities on the line to get an idea of what some of the technical assistance might look like. So in New Mexico, we released a request for proposals in February 2016, originally for 2 cooperatives and 3 megawatts for 3 1-megawatt systems. We received about 25 responses from developers and shortlisted 1 developer at that time. After the prices came in, which indicated very clear and quite large savings for electric cooperatives, the portfolio expanded to a final 4 cooperatives and 7 megawatts. And we saw prices as low as 4.5 cents a kilowatt hour for 1 megawatt arrays, where the commercial operation date is planned for early spring or late winter of next year, so about 4 to 5 months from today. Similarly, in Colorado, based on the lessons we learned in New Mexico, we launched an RFP a bit more than a year after we started the New Mexico RFP for 6 electric cooperatives and a total of 16.75 megawatts. We received more than 30 responses from solar developers, and the final portfolio includes 4 electric cooperatives and 1 municipal utility, with prices as low as 4 cents per kilowatt hour for a 5 megawatt array. PPAs are expected to be signed later this year, both for the munis and the co-ops. So that is to give you a flavor of how our partnership has helped actual electric cooperatives and municipal utilities to procure solar. And I would like to share 2 slides on what the economic benefit of grouping is, and then I will wrap up with a final slide on an overview of the technical assistance activities we can provide, which only slightly repeats Brian's last message. So first off, so let me describe the chart that you see. On the y-axis, you see PPA prices. On the x-axis, you see portfolio size. And this is the PPA price for a 1 megawatt project in a different portfolio size. The data points are for a 1 megawatt portfolio, i.e. no portfolio, single project, 10 megawatt, 15 megawatt, 20 megawatt, and 40 megawatt. The blue line and the data points on that line are for the top quartile, so the most expensive quartile. The red line is the median, and the purple line with crosses is the lowest 10%. And so what this slide shows is that if you take the difference between the top quartile and the lowest 10%, you can shave off about 25% of PPA price simply by ensuring that you are running a competitive procurement and that you are soliciting bids from the top developers. So this chart speaks in favor of not doing individual deals between utilities and developers, but rather running an RFP and ensuring it gets national interest. The second lesson in this slide is shown in the second build, which is that portfolio aggregation can reduce prices. So even when we do not increase the system size and we stay with 1 megawatt systems, going from an individual system to a 40 megawatt portfolio can drop PPA prices by, in this case, about $7 or $8 a megawatt hour, or almost a cent per kilowatt hour. And although that might sound relatively small, if this could be the difference between a negative and a positive net present value for the utility. So that is the second lesson here, that trying to build regional groups for whom to procure can lead to significant cost advantages for the utilities. So that being said, let me close with the final slide, which repeats some of Brian's message. We can provide different kinds of technical assistance to the utilities on the line, ranging from economic analysis tools to presentation materials and community solar program and rate design. These are all activities that happen before a procurement process is started. Then we can write an RFP using our standard RFP document, issue it to top national developers and regional developers, and evaluate the responses. And then finally, once responses are in and the vendors have been shortlisted, we can support site and interconnection analysis, provide a standard power purchase agreement, which can reduce legal costs, and communicate the results in national media. So, Brian, with that, I will hand it back over to you, and thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Titian. That was great. So that brings us to the end, and so thank you very much for everyone listening today. Please keep in touch with us through communitysolar@ncsu.edu, or I'm sure you've all probably heard from my colleague Ashut at least once by now, so you can reach out to him directly too. And again, we'll be sending you a link to a Google form, which you can use to sign up for a working group. We would really appreciate learning from you through your participation. And that does it for our webinar. Ashut, were there any questions from the group?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So we just had some clarifying questions. We didn't really have. Someone asked if this webinar was going to be made available. Yes, this webinar, including the previous webinar that we organized in August this year, and all additional documents that we've been creating as a part of this project are archived on our project website, and our email to you includes the link to that website. There are other questions that, there's a question I think just came in. Can you talk about HB 589's commitment to community solar? And I think the person is referring to the North Carolina bill that just passed in North Carolina. So this bill, as we understand, does not necessarily apply to cooperatives and municipal utilities. So this is a little beyond the scope out of our project.
But it is interesting, and I think a lot of the stuff in 589 is going to have to be determined by the Utilities Commission. There are some things written into 589 that kind of push the hand of the Utilities Commission one way or the other. And in the case of community solar, it presses upon the Utilities Commission to develop a rate for community solar customers they'll be credited at that's not the retail rate, something that is does no harm to the non-subscribed customers. So that'll be a huge discussion that has to play out at the Utilities Commission level. So it'll be a while before we understand the full impacts of that.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. And someone had a question asking if anyone can join the working group, or do they have to be do they have had to have registered for this webinar? And as far as they're concerned, anyone who's interested in participating in the working group can join. They're not restricted to having to listen to this webinar. I think that's the extent of questions that we received.
All right. Well, if there are no other questions, then I think we will adjourn and let you enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you all again for participating, and thank you in advance for signing up to help us with one of our working groups. Ciao.
Thank you.